The deep space research vessel HFY 7 drifted silently above an unremarkable blue planet. To the untrained eye, it was just another life-bearing world. But to the team of galactic surveyors aboard the ship, something about this place felt wrong. Captain Vorak, a seasoned Yelthan explorer, observed the massive screen displaying planetary data. His 6 eyes scanned the readings with growing concern. "Are you sure about these numbers?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Dr. Zealous, the lead scientist, double-checked her console. "There's no mistake, Captain. This planet's atmospheric composition, gravitational force, and biodiversity place it at the edge of Deathworld classification." The room fell silent. The term Deathworld was not used lightly. Planets classified as Deathworlds were considered too dangerous for colonization. Harsh environments, deadly predators, extreme climates, such planets were to be avoided at all costs. Yet, the scans suggested something even worse. The planet, labeled Sol 3 in galactic records, had a volatile atmosphere filled with unstable weather patterns. Hurricanes, earthquakes, and lightning storms strong enough to fry a cruiser's hull. The gravity was higher than standard, meaning life here had to be strong, very strong. But most alarming of all was the biodiversity. Millions of species of flora and fauna, many of them armed with natural weapons, venom, and unparalleled aggression. Vorak exhaled slowly. "And you say there's an intelligent species down there?" Dr. Zealous hesitated, her fingers tapping the console nervously. "Not just intelligent, but spacefaring." The crew exchanged worried glances. A Deathworld species that had developed space travel. That was unheard of. Lieutenant Heriza, the communications officer, brought up a holographic projection of the planet's civilizations. "There are multiple nations, advanced technology, and active space stations in orbit. They appear to be in the early stages of interstellar travel." Vorak's mandibles clicked together in frustration. "That's impossible. No Deathworld species has ever survived long enough to reach the stars." Dr. Zealous nodded grimly. "And yet, here they are." The data kept pouring in, and with each passing moment, the situation became more disturbing. They analyzed human biology, strong skeletal structures, advanced immune systems, incredible adaptability to environmental stress. Even their psychology was baffling. Humans were capable of extreme violence, yet they also displayed compassion, intelligence, and an unnatural level of curiosity. "They are warlike," Zealous continued, showing a timeline of human conflicts. "Wars have shaped their history. They have used nuclear weapons on their own species, and yet, somehow, they survived and continued advancing." Vorak shook his head. "This makes no sense. A species like this should have destroyed itself long ago." But the most terrifying discovery came when they ran the official Galactic Deathworld classification test. It was a system used to rank dangerous planets, ranging from Class 1, mildly hazardous, to Class 10, uninhabitable for most species. The test took into account weather conditions, biological threats, resource scarcity, and environmental hostility. As they fed Earth's data into the system, the entire crew held their breath. The result, Class 14, a Deathworld classification beyond anything ever recorded. The room erupted into chaos. Lieutenant Harris's tail twitched violently. "Class 14. That's impossible. The highest recorded Deathworld was Class 9. Even those planets are considered death traps. How is this place even livable?" Dr. Zealous stared at the screen, her normally calm demeanor shattered. "Not only is it livable, but this species thrives here." Vorak rubbed his temples. "Are we absolutely certain?" Zealous swallowed. "We ran the test twice. The results are the same." Silence fell over the room once more. No one had ever prepared for this. If this information got out, the entire Galactic Council would have no choice but to issue a complete quarantine of this system. Vorak took a deep breath. "We need more data. We can't report this without proof." Dr. Zealous hesitated. "You're not suggesting Direct observation. The captain locked his gaze onto her. We need to see them up close. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. A sense of dread settled over the crew. They had no idea what they were about to uncover. And worse, they had no idea that humanity already knew they were being watched. The HFY 7 hovered silently beyond the range of Earth's primitive detection systems. The Galactic Survey team had spent hours debating their next move, but in the end, the decision was clear. They needed direct observation. Captain Vorak stood in the dimly lit command deck, staring at the holographic projection of Earth's surface. We can't make assumptions. If these humans are truly spacefaring and surviving on a Class 14 Deathworld, we must understand how. Dr. Zealous adjusted her scanning equipment nervously. A stealth probe should suffice. We send it down, gather data, and leave undetected. Lieutenant Heraza flicked his tail, uneasy. If this goes wrong, Captain, we may be provoking a Deathworld species. That is not a risk we should take. Vorak exhaled slowly. We have no choice. Deploy the probe. Deployment over Earth. A small black stealth probe detached from the ship, entering Earth's atmosphere at an angle that minimized detection. Its advanced cloaking field kept it invisible to human radar. The mission was simple: scan human technology, biology, and behavior, then return. As the probe descended over a large landmass, the crew watched in fascination. Cities pulsed with energy, machines roared across the ground, and towering structures pierced the sky. But what unsettled them most wasn't the technology, it was the humans themselves. Dr. Zealous observed the live feed. They are everywhere. Millions, billions of them. Hera's scales bristled. How does any species thrive in such hostile conditions? The probe's scanners focused on a massive military facility near the coastline. It was a heavily fortified base, filled with war machines, metallic beasts with rotating cannons, aircraft that broke the sound barrier, and ships armed with enough firepower to devastate entire cities. Zealous' voice trembled. Their weapons, they are built for war, but not just war, total destruction. Vorak studied the data, his concern growing. They have never been part of the galactic community. They have never faced another spacefaring species, and yet they have created weapons capable of annihilation. The probe inched closer to the base, scanning deeper. It detected something unexpected. An active energy shield. Zealous' eyes widened. Captain, this is advanced shielding technology. It's almost on par with galactic defenses. Vorak stiffened. That's impossible. Heraza bared his fangs. Either they stole that technology from another species, or they invented it themselves. Suddenly, the probe's scanners flickered. An unidentified signal struck it, a precise electromagnetic pulse, disrupting its cloaking field. The crew's eyes widened in horror. Hera's voice was panicked. Captain, we've been detected. Vorak slammed his fist against the console. Impossible. Their technology isn't advanced enough to. The screen went black. The probe was gone. Destroyed. Or worse, captured. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Zealous barely whispered. They knew we were watching. Vorak's mandibles twitched. Prepare the ship for emergency departure. Now. Heraza hesitated. Captain, what if they already know where we are? Vorak turned to face his crew. His voice was grim. Then we may have just made first contact with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Alarms blared inside the HFY 7 as the Galactic Survey team scrambled to assess the situation. The probe was gone, but the real question remained: was it destroyed or captured? Captain Vorak's mandibles twitched as he turned toward Dr. Zealous. What happened? Zealous' hands moved swiftly across the controls, analyzing the last recorded data. The probe's systems shut down instantly. There was no explosion, no signal loss due to impact. This was a directed energy attack, precise and intentional. Lieutenant Heraza growled. You're saying the humans took it down on purpose? Zealous nodded grimly. Not just took it down. They hacked it. Vorak clenched his claws. That's impossible. The cloaking systems alone are beyond their technological level. There is no way they could detect, track, and disable our probe unless. He stopped. Unless they were already prepared. Humanity responds. A sudden ping echoed through the ship's communication systems. A message, an unauthorized incoming transmission, was trying to break into their secure channel. Captain, Harza shouted, his tail flicking in alarm. We're being contacted. Vorak felt his heart's pound. From where? Zealous' voice trembled. Earth. Silence filled the command deck. Then, the ship's monitors flickered, and a human face appeared on screen. The entire crew froze. It was a human male, dressed in a dark military uniform, sitting in a dimly lit room. His eyes were calm, focused, and dangerously intelligent. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. Unidentified vessel. We know you are watching. The crew stared at the screen, barely breathing. We detected your probe. We studied it. We know it was not of this world. Harza gripped the console, his claws digging into the metal. This isn't happening. The human continued, his expression never changing. We are not fools. And we are not primitive. You are not the first to observe us. But you will be the first to listen. A moment of eerie silence. Then the human's eyes darkened. Leave. Now, before we decide to study you instead. Then the transmission cut off. For a long moment, no one spoke. Vorak exhaled sharply, his mind racing. They intercepted our probe, cracked its encryption, and sent a warning before we could even react. Zealous' voice was barely a whisper. Captain, they weren't afraid. They were angry. Harris's scales bristled. And what did he mean? Before we decide to study you instead. Vorak didn't want to know. For the first time in his career, he felt a deep, cold fear settling in his chest. Earth wasn't just dangerous. It was watching back. Captain Vorak paced across the command deck of the HFY, his claws clicking against the metal floor. The air inside the ship felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. Fear. No one had expected this. They came to observe a primitive world, a planet thought to be harmless. Instead, Earth had turned the tables on them. They cracked our encryption, Vorak muttered. His voice was low, almost disbelieving. No civilization at their level should be able to do that. Lieutenant Harza flicked his tail anxiously. It wasn't just that. Did you see his expression? That human wasn't surprised to find us watching. He was expecting it. Dr. Zealous stood at his station, scanning the final logs from the probe. His face had gone pale, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something almost nervous. Captain, I've been analyzing the probe's last data package. Vorak stopped pacing. What did you find? Zealous took a deep breath. Before the probe was shut down, it managed to gather some concerning information. He tapped the console, bringing up holographic displays. Data streams scrolled rapidly. Earth's military records, technological advancements, energy output readings. Zealous turned to face the crew. We assumed humanity was still in a pre-interstellar stage, but their technological development is. He hesitated. It's unnatural. Vorak narrowed his eyes. Explain. Zealous' hands trembled slightly as he zoomed in on one particular section of data. Humans have only existed as a technological species for a few thousand years. That's nothing compared to most galactic civilizations. And yet, their scientific progress is accelerating at an exponential rate. Harza leaned forward. How fast are we talking? Zealous looked up, his eyes filled with something close to dread. If they continue at this pace, they will surpass most galactic empires within a century. Silence. Something is wrong with Earth. Vorak exhaled, his mind racing. That doesn't make sense. No species evolves that quickly. Zealous nodded. Exactly. It's as if something is pushing them forward. The screens shifted, displaying battle footage, human conflicts, wars fought across centuries, massive devastation. But every time humanity was knocked down, they got back up. And they came back stronger. This is terrifying, Zealous muttered. War should slow down technological progress. But for humans, it seems to do the opposite. Vorak's mandibles twitched. They evolved through conflict. Harris's tail lashed behind him. You're saying their own violence is making them more dangerous. Zealous swallowed hard. That's not the worst part. He turned to another display, bringing up a new data set. The probe scanned Earth's environment before it was intercepted, and it detected multiple extinction-level events in its past. Massive asteroid impacts, global supervolcano eruptions, ice ages. Nuclear war nearly wiped them out, twice. Vorak's eyes widened, and they survived all of it. Zealous nodded. Not just survived. They adapted. The room fell silent. No other known species had endured so many disasters in such a short evolutionary timespan. Any other race would have been wiped out. But humans, they thrived. A dangerous decision. Vorak straightened. We need to report this to the Galactic Council. Harris stepped forward, his scales bristling. Captain, are you sure? If we inform the Council, they might see humanity as a threat. Vorak's eyes darkened. They are a threat. If they continue advancing like this, they will be unstoppable. Harris hesitated. Maybe that's not a bad thing. The entire bridge turned to stare at him. The lieutenant took a deep breath. Think about it. Every dominant power in the galaxy expanded through conquest. The Council has crushed weaker civilizations, enslaved entire species, and declared any world with potential too dangerous to exist. He glanced at the dark screen where the human's message had played just moments ago. Humans are different. They don't conquer. They fight only when they have to. They don't want war, but they're really good at it. Vorak stayed silent, considering his words. Then Zealous spoke. If we warn the Council, they might decide to act before humanity becomes too powerful. He hesitated. And if they attack Earth first? He didn't finish. He didn't have to. If the Council declared war on Earth, they might win the first battle. But after that, humanity would never stop fighting. Vorak closed his eyes, his decision made. Erase the data. Zealous looked at him in shock. What? Vorak turned to the crew. We never saw Earth. We never scanned it. The probe was lost in a gravitational anomaly. His voice was firm. If the Council learns the truth, they will force a war that no one can win. Harris let out a breath of relief. You're making the right call, Captain. But as Vorak stared at the darkened screen, he wasn't so sure. Because deep in his heart, he knew the truth. Humanity was dangerous, and someday the galaxy would find out the hard way. Vorak stood motionless on the bridge, his gaze locked onto the darkened screen where the human's face had last appeared. The words still echoed in his mind. We see you. A chill ran through him. Humans should not have been able to detect their probe. They should not have been able to break encrypted signals. They should not have been able to respond instantly. And yet they had. Zealous broke the silence first. Captain, if we erase the data, we'll be committing treason. Vorak turned sharply, his mandibles clicking in frustration. If we report the truth, the Galactic Council will declare Earth a hostile entity. Do you know what happens next? Harris's voice was quiet, but firm. They'll send a fleet. The weight of the words settled over the crew. They had all seen what happened to civilizations deemed too dangerous. The Council would send their greatest warships, wipe out Earth before it had a chance to become a true power, and erase humanity from history. Vorak's fists clenched. He had fought in wars. He had seen species crushed beneath the Council's might. But for the first time in his life, he had a deep, unsettling feeling in his gut. This time would be different. Erasing the evidence. Zealous hesitated, then turned back to his station. His fingers hovered over the control panel. If we do this, we have to be thorough. The Council has data tracking protocols. If they detect missing files. They won't, Vorak interrupted. We're not just deleting the data. We're rewriting it. Harris's eyes widened. You're going to falsify the report. Vorak nodded. The official logs will state that the probe was lost due to an unexpected gravitational disturbance. Zealous sighed heavily. I hope you know what you're doing, Captain. But despite his words, his fingers moved over the console, altering the logs. Line by line, the data disappeared, replaced with a fabricated report. The information about Earth's rapid technological evolution, gone. The proof of humanity's unnatural survival and resilience, deleted. The video of the human scientists staring directly into the probe's lens, erased. Harris watched the screen as the last file was purged. It's done, Zealous said. His voice was quiet, almost regretful. Vorak took a deep breath. Good. But even as he spoke the word, he felt no relief. The Council's shadow. Hours later, the ship drifted silently in the cold void of space. The crew had resumed their duties, but an unspoken tension hung over them all. Then, a sudden alarm pierced the silence. Incoming transmission, one of the communications officers announced. Vorak's mandibles tightened. Who is it? The officer checked the signal. His skin paled. It's from Council Command. A cold dread settled in Vorak's chest. Had they been discovered? Put it through, he ordered. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge. A tall, imposing figure appeared. Admiral Krillin of the Galactic Council fleet. His reptilian eyes narrowed as he surveyed Vorak and his crew. Captain Vorak, Krillin said slowly, we received an automated alert from your ship's system. Your probe was lost. Vorak stood straighter. Yes, sir. A gravitational anomaly destroyed it before we could recover significant data. Krillin's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. The silence was unbearable. Then, finally, the Admiral nodded. Unfortunate. That sector has been unstable for some time. Vorak forced himself to stay calm. Indeed, sir. Krillin exhaled through his nostrils. Very well. Return to base for debriefing. The Council has more important matters to deal with. The transmission ended abruptly. Zealous let out a shaky breath. That was too close. Vorak's jaw clenched. They had lied to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and it had worked. For now, the unfinished business. As the ship set course away from Earth, Harris turned to Vorak. What if we made a mistake? Vorak looked at him, saying nothing. Harris continued, his voice barely above a whisper. What if humanity really is as dangerous as we feared? Vorak's gaze drifted to the stars. Then we've just delayed the inevitable. Silence fell between them. Because deep down, they both knew the truth. The Council might never know what they had found. But someday, humanity would reach the stars. And when that day came, the galaxy would never be the same. The Varkian research vessel drifted through the void, putting more distance between itself and the human homeworld. The crew had erased the probe's data, rewritten their report, and survived a tense conversation with the Galactic Council's Admiral Krillin. But Captain Vorak could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He sat alone in his quarters, staring at a blank monitor, replaying the last moments of the probe's transmission in his mind. We see you. 2 words, but those words had felt like a warning. Then there had been the look in the human scientist's eyes, calm, knowing, unafraid. Had they made a mistake by covering this up? A signal from nowhere. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. Vorak jolted to his feet as his communicator crackled. Captain, you need to get to the bridge. Now. He rushed through the corridors, his crew moving aside with nervous glances. When he reached the bridge, he found Zealous and Harris standing over the communications panel, their faces pale. What is it? Vorak demanded. Zealous turned to him, eyes wide. We just received a message. Vorak frowned. From who? That's the problem. Sir, Herr hesitated. The transmission came from inside our own ship. Vorak froze. What? Zealous pointed to the screen. The signal originated from our internal network. Someone, or something, sent a message through our systems without triggering security protocols. Vorak's mandibles clicked. Play it. Zealous pressed a button. The message appeared in plain galactic standard text on the screen. STOPLYNG to UORS LVs. UCANT AIDE from US. We CEU. The bridge fell into dead silence. Vorak's mind raced. This has to be a malfunction. Zealous swallowed hard. I already checked. It's not. Harris's voice was barely a whisper. They're in our systems. A silent invasion. Vorak turned sharply. Shut down all external connections. Purge the system. Wipe every. Sir, Zealous interrupted, his voice shaking. They've already done it. Vorak's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? Zealous's fingers danced over the controls. They deleted our navigation logs, communication history, everything connected to our last mission. As if we were never there. Harris's claws dug into the console. We don't even have proof that we visited Earth. Vorak's pulse pounded in his ears. This was impossible. No species had this kind of cyber warfare capability. Even the Galactic Council's most advanced AIs couldn't infiltrate an alien ship and erase data remotely. But the humans had. And worse, they had done it without alerting anyone until they wanted to be noticed. Vorak's claws curled into fists. How is this possible? We never connected our ship to any human networks. We stayed in deep orbit. Zealous's voice was hollow. It doesn't matter, Captain. They found a way. No escape. A new alert flashed on the console. Vorak stepped forward, feeling his stomach twist into knots. Another message appeared. Do not return. Do not speak of US. This is your The message disappeared, and the entire bridge went dark. The lights flickered for a long, agonizing moment before emergency power restored basic systems. Vorak's breathing was shallow. Are they still in the ship's network? Zealous checked. No, I think they're gone. Vorak exhaled, but the weight on his chest didn't lift. The humans hadn't just hacked their ship. They had controlled it, watched them, and now they were letting them go. Because they didn't see them as a threat. Harris's voice broke the silence. Captain, what do we do now? Vorak's gaze was locked on the screen where the last message had appeared. He didn't know what terrified him more. The fact that humanity had power beyond anything they could understand, or the fact that, despite everything, they were letting the Varkians live. Captain Vorak paced back and forth across the command deck of his ship. His claws clicked softly against the floor as he tried to process the events of the past few hours. The message from Earth had sent shockwaves through his entire crew, and even now, his mind raced with unanswered questions. The Varkian ship was now hundreds of light years away from Earth, but the threat felt closer than ever. The humans had sent their warning with chilling precision. Do not return. Do not speak of us. But it wasn't just the words that unsettled Vorak. It was the ease with which the humans had infiltrated their ship. No warning, no alarms, just a silent, invisible invasion. The Varkians had fought countless battles, faced the deadliest species in the galaxy, but none of them had ever encountered anything like this. No one had. A ticking time bomb. Vorak glanced at his crew, his mind still grappling with what had just occurred. His first officer, Zealous, was sitting at the console, silently watching the star map as they continued to drift farther from Earth. Herza, the tactical officer, was pacing with clenched fists, clearly on edge. You're all quiet. Vorak remarked, his voice a low growl. No more questions. No more theories. Zealous turned, his face grim. Captain, we're out of their reach for now. But I don't think we've seen the last of them. Vorak's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Zealous hesitated, eyes flicking to Heriza before returning to his captain. We have no idea what they want. They could be watching us now, or they could be planning something even worse. The fact that they wiped our systems without leaving a trace. It means they're far more advanced than we ever thought. Heriza, who had been pacing, suddenly stopped. What if they have already sent a message to the Galactic Council? What if they are watching everyone right now, waiting for the right moment to strike? Vorak clenched his fists. No, they wouldn't do that. The humans didn't send us a message for our benefit. They did it to send a warning. He turned to the view screen, which now displayed nothing but the vast emptiness of space. We've been marked. The unseen enemy. The crew fell silent. Vorak's words hung in the air like a dark omen. The humans hadn't needed to confront the Varkians directly. They hadn't fired a shot or launched a single weapon. No, they had done something far worse. They had invaded the Varkian mind. They had made them aware. Captain, Zealous said softly, his voice trembling. We're not alone in the galaxy anymore. Whatever the humans are, they don't see us as a threat. They're playing us, toying with us, and we have no way of knowing how far their reach really goes. Vorak's mind raced. He had never felt so vulnerable in his life. The Varkians were one of the galaxy's most feared species. They had conquered worlds, destroyed fleets, and crushed armies. But against the humans, they were like children. Heriza spoke again, his voice shaking with fear. What if they'd done this to other ships? What if we're the only ones left who don't know? Vorak turned to the tactical officer. That's not possible. We're sure this is the first time they've acted. If they had done this before, we would have heard of it by now. The Galactic Council would have acted. But what if they haven't? Zealous asked, his face pale. What if they're waiting for the right moment to show us exactly what they're capable of? A dangerous game. Vorak clenched his fists tighter. There had been no explosions, no sudden attacks. Just silence, and silence, Vorak knew, could be far more terrifying than any weapon. Perhaps the humans aren't interested in destroying us, Vorak muttered. Perhaps their plan is something worse. He turned to face his crew, trying to make sense of it all. The humans had left a message, a warning. But they hadn't made a move. They hadn't even reacted when the Varkian fleet had set its sights on Earth. Instead, they had watched, waited, and left their mark on the Varkians without lifting a finger. Perhaps it was a test. Perhaps the humans had already seen the Varkian species as a problem to be solved. The return of the silence. Suddenly, the silence of the command deck was broken by a soft beep on the communication panel. Vorak's heart skipped a beat. He approached the console cautiously, eyes narrowed. Do you think it's them? Zealous asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vorak paused. He looked at his crew. They all stood together, tense, waiting for his decision. He nodded. Let's see what they have for us this time. He pressed the button to display the message, holding his breath. The screen flickered to life. The message was simple. We are waiting. A chill ran down Vorak's spine. And that was all. No threats, no promises, just a statement. The silence in the command room was unbearable. The message flashed on the screen, its simple, chilling words lingering in the air like a shadow over the Varkian crew. We are waiting. Vorak stared at the screen, unable to comprehend the weight of the message. No threats, no demands, just those words. The humans were watching, and they had made it clear they knew everything about the Varkian fleet. Everything. Captain, what does this mean? Zealous asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. Vorak didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. His mind was racing, spinning with the implications. The humans had not attacked. They hadn't sent fleets of ships or fired a single shot. They had just observed. And now, they had delivered this warning, leaving the Varkians with more questions than answers. The message had been sent to the Varkian fleet's communication network, and Vorak knew it was likely to be received by every ship in the fleet. It was a message for all of them. But why now? Why wait until the Varkians had already been so deeply involved with the threat? Was this some kind of test? The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They were used to facing battles, to fighting wars. But this was something entirely different. The humans' true power. Vorak turned back to the screen, his claws tightening into fists. The more he thought about the humans, the more he realized the true scope of the threat they posed. Zealous, can you pull up all available data on Earth? Vorak's voice was sharp, as if he were hoping the information would somehow bring clarity to the situation. Zealous quickly complied, pulling up a wealth of data about the human species. Most of it was mundane: history, culture, technology. But the more Zealous dug, the more alarming the details became. The humans have been at war with themselves for centuries. They have been on the brink of extinction multiple times, yet they survive, Zealous said, his voice growing more fascinated than fearful. They've fought wars, built incredible weapons, and explored the deepest reaches of space. Yet their greatest strength isn't in their technology, it's in their adaptability. Vorak nodded grimly. The Varkians were not used to facing an enemy that could adapt in ways they couldn't predict. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And now they were capable of a level of subtlety that the Varkians hadn't anticipated. We've made a terrible mistake, Vorak muttered under his breath. The consequences of underestimating humanity. As Vorak stood before the screen, another message arrived, this time from the command ship at the front of the Varkian fleet. The message was short but to the point. Evacuate Earth's proximity. Return to base. The humans are not our enemy. Not yet. Vorak knew what it meant. The Varkians had underestimated Earth and its inhabitants. They had thought of humanity as nothing more than a curiosity, a species that was still young, still fragile. But now the humans had shown them just how wrong they were. The Varkians had assumed that their overwhelming firepower and superior military strategies would make them unstoppable, but they had failed to account for the humans' greatest weapon: their unpredictability. The humans hadn't fought back in the ways the Varkians expected. Instead, they had shown restraint, silence, and a chilling ability to make the Varkians question everything they knew. The final decision. Vorak clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always prided himself on his ability to lead, to command his fleet with unwavering strength. But now, in the face of the unknown, he felt helpless. "Captain, we need to leave," Zealous said, breaking the silence. "We can't keep pushing forward. The humans are more dangerous than we thought. We don't know what they're capable of." Harrison spoke next, his voice filled with urgency. "We've faced threats before, but none like this. The humans have the upper hand now. We can't underestimate them again." Vorak stood still, staring at the message on the screen. He knew what he had to do. He had to make the call to retreat. The fleet needed to pull back, regroup, and reconsider their strategy. But there was a part of him, an instinct, that told him this wasn't over. The humans had left a mark on the Varkian fleet that would never fade. The message was clear. Earth was no longer a place that could be ignored. The Varkians were not the only ones who could adapt. "Prepare for departure," Vorak said finally, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "We leave orbit and return to the nearest outpost. We'll assess the situation from there." As the crew began to make the necessary preparations, Vorak couldn't shake the feeling that they had just crossed a line. The Varkians had come to Earth thinking they would conquer, but now they were the ones running. And deep down, Vorak knew this was just the beginning. The humans had made their point, and the Varkians would have to live with the consequences. The last word. As the Varkian fleet began its retreat, one last message flashed across the screen. This time, it was brief and to the point, as if it were just a final reminder. This is your last warning. Stay away from Earth, or face the consequences. Vorak couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. Earth, the planet they had once dismissed, was now a force to be reckoned with. And as the fleet turned its back on the once innocent planet, Vorak couldn't help but wonder if they had made a mistake that would haunt them for the rest of their existence.